Thank you, Ken Corner. As this is my first contribution to the Dáil, if I could just take a moment just to thank the people of Dublin Fingal for placing their faith in me to be one of their 5 representatives in the Dáil. It's an honour beyond words, and I will do my utmost to repay their faith that they've placed in me. Since polling day over 7 weeks ago, be it the clutch of new deputies or even the most experienced deputies, could not have thought what we'd be facing now. We are living in a world that is more frightening, more insecure and far more uncertain. We have a lot of work to do to beat this virus back, both in Ireland and across the world, but I believe we will do it. We also must be mindful of the fact we will be facing the implications of what COVID-19 is doing for many months and perhaps years to come, both economically, socially, politically and beyond. We must be mindful of this when making decisions, even in the white heat of the crisis, such as we are experiencing. But now is not a time to panic. We have actions to take, and we will take them. I'd like to commend the leadership being shown up and down the country. There has been leadership shown from all sides of this House, and it has to be commended. It's been consistent, it's been strong, and it must continue. There's been leadership shown from the HSE, from the public and the civil service, and again, that must be commended. It will have to continue. But it all pales in comparison to the leadership that's been shown by ordinary people up and down the country. The sports clubs, community groups, heads of households, even administrators on community Facebook groups and community WhatsApp groups, they've actually been at the front line of a battle against fake news and fake reporting, and they've done great work in terms of trying to keep good information flowing to keep people safe and healthy. It's the workers in our health service, both frontline and indeed support workers, healthcare assistants, porters, cleaners, that have been truly making an unbelievable collective effort. It is the bravery and courage being shown by our retail workers who every single day are there serving the needs of the community, making sure that we're fed, and the panic and the worry we had regarding purchasing behaviours earlier on in this crisis has kind of dissipated as we meet our new reality. Today's emergency legislation is another important step in fighting this crisis. The measures put forward today will have profound political implications, as I mentioned, but I am encouraged by what the Taoiseach said in relation to early childcare and illness benefit. It's a cautious optimism, but the measures we take now may not be repealed in 12 weeks or 6 weeks or 6 months if we believe that they are for the better good of the country. The COVID-19 emergency is a crisis on multiple fronts. It's not just a health crisis. It is a crisis that reaches across the whole of society and the economy. We in the Labour Party, like everyone in this House, we have tremendous respect for all our frontline and support healthcare workers who are providing care in our hospitals and in our GP clinics. But when we think of our GP, we must also think of the GP receptionists. And when we think of our frontline nurses and doctors, we must also think, as I said, of the receptionists and of the porters and of the cleaners. We acknowledge what the Government and the HSE have done to ramp up testing to challenge people to change their day-to-day behaviour. It's not an easy task, but the Irish people have responded and responded well. Looking at what is happening in other countries around the world, I believe that the Irish people have been well served by the way in which political parties have cooperated to support the official response to this crisis. But the crisis does not just stop at the health system, and I am concerned that when it comes to the economy, it will be harder to maintain the same level of political consensus, given how divisive issues like housing have been in recent years. The Government's response to the overall economic crisis will be as important as its ability to deal with the different dimensions of the health emergency. For example, like much of the economy, our frontline health services rely on just-in-time supply lines and global markets to provide them with the medical equipment they need. This global system has come under enormous strain. Our health service have done a credible job to date in terms of securing personal protective equipment for our frontline workers, but there are very real concerns remaining. We are hearing reports of frontline nursing staff having to wash PPE in sinks and baths for reuse. This is something that's intolerable, I'm sure we all agree, and we're all praying that this plane arrives with enough equipment, and we're all hoping that any efforts can be made to source equipment from within the boundaries of the state and funnel it to the people who need it to keep people alive as soon as possible. It's also been reported that student nurses who are serving on the front line assisting COVID-19 patients are not yet being paid. We need to tackle that, and we need to tackle that urgently. Can the Government confirm what is happening, and when will the Government guarantee decent rates of pay for all staff across all levels of the health service who are tackling this emergency? On another front, we don't yet have up-to-date figures of unemployment or the live register, but we know that hundreds of thousands of people have lost their jobs or been temporarily laid off due to the COVID-19 emergency. We must ensure that people are protected and that the most vulnerable workers do not suffer unfairly due to this epidemic. In principle, Labour welcomes the measures being introduced in this bill. We welcome the rent freeze and the ban on evictions introduced in Part 2 of the bill, but issues of major concern remain. Firstly, a great many workers in retail or hospitality are renters, and even with COVID-19 unemployment payment, many of them will have reduced ability to pay rent alongside their costs. If this crisis lasts 3 to 6 months, we will have a generation of low-paid workers who will end up in debt due to rent arrears or other payment arrears. This cannot happen. Secondly, some tenants may face eviction once the crisis ends and we return to some form of normality on the housing and affordability crisis. If we return to the normality of the housing and affordability crisis, this also cannot happen. What plans does the government have to ensure that this doesn't happen? Please, we need to know, Taoiseach. In particular, where landlords benefit from a mortgage holiday for a period of months, will the government ensure that rent will be waived for tenants during this same period? This must happen. While the housing crisis requires homes to be built, we do have concerns in relation to some working environments, such as building sites remaining open, in a context where social distancing may not always be possible or practised on sites. I myself have experience working on very small sites, and thinking yesterday and overnight of the work that I did, the impossibility you have if labouring for a carpenter or a bricklayer or a sparks in keeping any kind of social or physical distance. There's no way around it. So we need urgent action in this area. I spoke to workers yesterday in the construction industry who are concerned for their safety and the safety of their families. I've spoken to family members of workers in the construction industry who are concerned of their loved ones coming home from work and bringing the COVID-19 with them. This is something that needs urgent attention and needs it quickly. Another serious problem caused by the COVID-19 emergency is that our courts are not sitting due to the need for social distancing. Delays and future backlog of processing cases could mean that the statute of limitations might rule out prosecutions that would have proceeded in the normal course of events. This is clearly not desirable, and the amendment we're going to bring this evening provides some sort of solution, and I hope it will get support throughout the House. There are many other issues we're going to bring up throughout the course of the day as we have our opportunity, but if I may just at this juncture just conclude on some of the measures that were announced earlier this week in relation to social gatherings. They were the right measures, but they do have a cost, and in particular in relation to funerals, which are still allowed to proceed but under strict new guidelines. And again, this is understandable. When faced with a global pandemic, which is claiming thousands of lives worldwide and which has claimed 16 so far on our island, we all have had more than a passing thought about our own mortality and that of those close to us and our loved ones. But people are passing away of COVID-19, and they're passing away of usual illnesses, long-term, short-term and suddenly, with only close family members able to mourn their passing and celebrate their lives. I've always thought Ireland have celebrated the lives of those who've passed better than almost anywhere else. And for those of us who've celebrated the passing of someone close to us recently, we know the comfort that brings to those who are bereaved. In normal times, we mourn as a community, we mourn as neighbours, we mourn as friends. We need to spare a thought for all those people enduring loss at this time, be it through COVID-19 or any other means. They're doing so at a time when the nation's attention is focused on this battle. And a lot of us are looking forward to when restaurants open again, when bars open again, when we can bring our children to see their grandparents. We can see that there is light at the end of the tunnel. But we only get one opportunity to say goodbye to a loved one. So the loneliness that people must be feeling at this time must be especially acute. We must ensure that the sacrifice that has been thrust upon them for these reasons is not forgotten, and that we don't forget them, and that when we are reaching out, that we make an extra special effort for those people. It's one of the many reasons we need to stick to the rules, where we need to redouble our efforts every day to support all our healthcare workers, to support all our retail workers, to support all those people who are out working for us at the moment. So we once again can celebrate all joy and tragedies together, as we have done as a country, as friends, as neighbours, as a community and as a nation. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Deputy Smith, and congratulations on your maiden address. It's one I'm sure you'll never forget.